Good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Victor O from Ontario, and I'm pleased to join by the Honourable Senator Yuen from British Columbia, Mrs. Teresa Woo-Paw from the Action Chinese Canadian Together Foundation. This morning, we are pleased to announce that on June 23, 2023, we will be hosting a national remembrance ceremony to mark the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Exclusion Act. This ceremony presents an opportunity to recognize the injustice committed against early Chinese Canadians, while increasing Canadians' knowledge of our shared history, while celebrating the many accomplishments of our community over the past 100 years. I would like to highlight that this is a non-partisan initiative led by myself and Senator Yuen alongside the ACCT Foundations. We welcome the participation of MPs and senators from all sides and backgrounds. We also look forward to working with Chinese community groups from coast to coast to coast, and to mark this milestone occasion. In anticipation of the ceremony, we would also like to announce the launch of the website where Canadians can learn more about the Chinese Exclusion Act, and Chinese Canadian organizations can share their centenary commemorative events. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleagues, the Honourable Senator Yuen, who will share more details about the significance of this anniversary and the impact that has done in our community. Senator Wu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator O. Good morning. The Chinese Immigration Act of 1923, better known as the Chinese Exclusion Act, was the culmination of a series of racist laws passed by the government of Canada as early as 1885. Starting with the head tax and other measures to strip rights from Chinese who were living in the country, the country decided in 1923 to go to the extreme of forbidding all Chinese from entering the country. The Exclusion Act was in fact seen as the necessary means to accomplish what the head tax was not able to accomplish. For 24 years, until the repeal of the Exclusion Act, Chinese were not allowed to come to Canada except for a few small exceptions. In addition, Chinese who were already in the country were forced to register within 1 year of the coming into force of the Chinese Immigration Act 1923. And failure to register would have led to jail or fines, or both, as well as the threat of deportation. Even after registering, Chinese in Canada faced constant threat of harassment and investigation as to whether they were legitimately in the country. And this was a threat over them and a stigmatization over the Chinese community for that long period of 24 years. The Exclusion Act gained royal assent on the 30th of June in 1923, just before Dominion Day. Because of the horror that it inflicted on the Chinese community, many Chinese took to calling the 1st of July Humiliation Day. I won't go more into the detailed history of the Chinese Exclusion Act, but we have an expert in the room that you may want to consult if you have more questions. He's Professor Timothy Stanley, Professor Emeritus from the University of Ottawa. Instead, I want to focus on the 100th anniversary remembrance event that Senator Oh alluded to, and which we're so pleased to be organizing with Action Chinese Canadians together. There's a special reason for the Senate of Canada taking the lead in remembering the 100th anniversary. It was, of course, the Senate, as the upper house, that passed this law. And I would add that it was senators from British Columbia, my predecessors, who made some of the most odious speeches in the upper house in support of that law. The Senate of Canada also today is located in a former railway station, which is, of course, part of the network of railways that Chinese laborers were brought into the country to build and who paid with their lives for building that railroad, particularly over the most treacherous parts of the construction over the Rockies. In addition to attendance by dignitaries at this event on the 23rd of June, we will have a number of specially planned performances to mark the occasion. We will have a specially commissioned dance, we will have a spoken word performance, and we will have the performance of a song that was written 100 years ago in protest against the Chinese Exclusion Act. Unfortunately, the music to that song has been lost, but we're so pleased to be able to commission a young Chinese-Canadian composer, the descendant of somebody who paid the head tax, to produce fresh music for these lyrics. As part of the 100th anniversary, we have made a request to the Government of Canada to designate a centenary plaque that marks the occasion, and we have the goal of having this plaque installed permanently in Centre Block on Parliament Hill when the renovations are completed. This will be a fitting bookend, if I can put it that way, to 100 years of a very sad episode in Canada's history. In addition to the 23rd June event, we will be mounting an exhibition on the Chinese Exclusion Act in the Senate of Canada building, roughly from the end of May till June the 23rd. This exhibition will feature original parliamentary documents as well as reproductions and maybe some original copies of head tax and registration certificates. We are very pleased to have the support of the Chinese Canadian Museum in Vancouver, particularly the curator Catherine Clement, in supporting this exhibition. We also have terrific support from the Library of Parliament, the National Archives of Canada, and the Museum of History. I invite all of you to take part in that exhibition. One of the most exciting parts of the National Remembrance event is the fact that we will be live streaming it across the world. Because the Senate chamber can only accommodate a relatively small number of attendees, and that because there are so many Canadians who want to participate in it, we have arranged for this live streaming to be made available at viewing parties across the country. And we strongly encourage members of the Chinese community and others to organize these viewing parties on June 23rd to take part with us in the National Remembrance event. And finally, Senator Oh has already alluded to the launch of a website. I will turn over now to my colleague, Teresa Woo-Paw, to tell you more about that.
Well, thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. I'm Teresa Woo-Paw, Chair of the Action Chinese Canadian Together Foundation. Thank you for joining the press conference today as we announce the national remembrance on the centenary of the Chinese Exclusion Act event on June 23rd this year, right here in the Senate building. The Action Chinese Canadian Together, or ACT Foundation, with the mandate to advance Chinese Canadian civic engagement and leadership development, as well as building the capacity of Chinese Canadian leaders committed to creating a more equitable society in Canada, is very pleased and honored to collaborate with the Senate of Canada under the incredible leadership and support from the honorable senators here. The Chinese Immigration Act, or better known as the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1923, had a dramatic and devastating impact on Chinese immigrants and their communities inside and outside of Canada. Tens of thousands of Chinese, who were mostly men, were physically cut off from their spouses and children in China. Very few Chinese in Canada during that time period had the financial means to visit family back in China, nor were they allowed to sponsor family members to come to Canada. The affected Chinese faced a state-imposed familial isolation. Moreover, their existence in Canada during this time period was one of enduring heightened racial stereotyping and individual and institutional racism. An example of the latter is the Dominion Election Act of 1920, which denied the Chinese in Canada and many other racialized minorities the right to run for the Canadian Parliament. These stories may not be taught in our schools or told through libraries and movies. These are lived experience of many and many generations of Canadians of Chinese descent, including my very own family. And these legislations are especially poignant for me as a Chinese Canadian who have served my country in public offices. It is our hope that in 2023, with the various activities being planned across Canada, will help raise awareness about this Canadian history, understand its impacts and what it means for all of us now as we look to the next 100 years. The ACT Foundation is pleased to launch the Chinese Exclusion Centenary website, Chinese Exclusion Centenary.ca, which serves as a hub for individuals and organizations interested in commemorating the Exclusion Act. It features a range of events and activities happening across Canada with the goal to provide opportunities for learning, reflection, and dialogue. All are welcome to submit their events, activities, and resources related to the centenary so that we can help amplify the efforts that are raised to recognize this very important milestone in Canadian history. This is a collaborative initiative led by ACCT with participation from other Chinese Canadian organizations. We would like to encourage groups planning viewing parties for June the 23rd to let us know via the website as soon as possible. Following the National Remembrance event is the ACT Foundation's Aspire to Lead Chinese Canadian Leaders Summit, which will be held June 24th to the 25th right here in Ottawa. So the summit that started in 2019 with the aim to bring together emerging and established leaders to examine systemic issues of underrepresentation, the need for institutional change, as well as recognition of Chinese Canadian achievements from across Canadian society. As we are gathered today in the Senate building, I think it's fitting for me to acknowledge our founding members. And honorary chair of the foundation is the retired Honorable Senator Vivian Poy, the first Canadian senator of Asian descent, as well as Senator Yuen, the current senator. So the summit, which was attended by over 700 participants in the first two gatherings, is a forum to generate insights and knowledge and connect inspirational leaders and trailblazers to engage in thought-provoking dialogue, be supported by a community of leaders, and be inspired to lead, contributing to a more inclusive and equitable Canada. The summit is a unique event where participants describe as inspirational and mind-changing. It offers a space for them to share their experiences and elevate their leadership skills, and gave them the sense of pride of being Chinese Canadian. The 2023 summit with the remembrance of the centenary of the Chinese Exclusion Act event and an intercultural dialogue amongst a Jewish Canadian journalist and author, Marsha Learman, Canada's representative on anti-Islamophobia, Emira, and the Chinese Canadian leaders, including the president of the Chief of Police on Reserves, Chief Kai Liu, to set the stage for deep conversations on civic leadership that builds resilience and contributing to the social cohesion in Canada. We would like to invite those who are aspired to serve, to lead, who wishes to contribute to the conversation, as well as policymakers, academia, to partake in the Aspire to Lead Summit. And I'm very pleased that we're joined by some community partners here from Ottawa today. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. For those, we will go first to questions in the room and then to questions online. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and I will take down your name. Just before I ask that, David Aiken, from Global, you had put up your hand.
Thanks, Liz. David Aiken from Global. Senator Wu, I'd like to ask you about a tweet you had after Minister Mendicino announced the intention to establish a foreign registry. You tweeted, "How can we prevent this registry from becoming a modern form of Chinese exclusion?" You didn't answer the question, and you said, "Speak out." And I wondered if you'd like to answer your own question. How can we prevent this proposed registry from becoming a form of modern exclusion?
The consultation is an excellent opportunity for all Canadians, particularly Chinese Canadians, to express their views on how this registry will not be stigmatizing, will not be punishing, will not be alienating in the way that the Exclusion Act was 100 years ago. And I encourage all Canadians to, in fact, participate vigorously in the consultation so that the foreign influence registry does not lead to adverse effects on any racialized community.
You may have heard there was testimony last week at the House of Commons Ethics Committee, and it heard from some representatives of Chinese Canadian groups who believe the registry is a good idea. They don't know if it would be very effective. They think maybe something like a hotline for members of any diaspora community in this country who are, Iranian, Chinese, whatever, might be harassed by that regime. I wonder if you have some thoughts about the effectiveness of the registry to do what it's intended to do, and whether there might be some other means to assist Chinese Canadians who feel under threat from the Chinese government in Beijing.
Well, we don't know what the registry will say or do. That's a consultation process that's underway. And I would like to think that even advocates of a registry would agree with me that it should not be one that stigmatizes or alienates any particular community. So I would encourage them as well to weigh in fully so that we can have a registry that is fair, that's compliant with our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and does not stigmatize Chinese Canadians or other racialized communities.
Prochaine question, Marie Chabot Johnson, Radio-Canada.
Let's stay on this topic. Do you think there's any way there could be a registry that doesn't fuel any part of racism in the country?
I think that's for the consultation to reveal, and this is why it's so important that all Canadians who are interested in this topic and who have concerns about it to voice those concerns. I am against foreign interference in our political system, and particularly against any foreign interference that is coercive, that involves corruption, and is covert. We may need new laws to deal with covert, to deal with coercive and corrupt activities, and the registry may well help us in that direction. But I really don't want to prejudge the outcome of the consultation, and once again invite Canadians who are interested and concerned about this issue to speak up.
Speaking right now, one thing we want to know is your concern. How is the registry could stigmatize? What concretely would be something you would raise a flag yourself?
An overly broad registry that forces individuals to register because of where they come from, because of what they think, and because of who they affiliate with would probably go too far.
Okay. Next question, and I will present my excuses because everyone's been working from home, so I'm not going to recognize everyone's face in the room. Last row.
Hi, Stephanie Taylor with the Canadian Press. I just want to know your position, Senator. Does Canada need a foreign influence registry?
Canada needs to counter foreign interference when it is covert, when it is coercive, and where there is corruption involved. There are potentially many different tools for doing that, and a registry may be one of them. Let's see what the consultation brings so that we can decide if, in fact, the registry is the best way to counter what we all agree with. We need to counter foreign interference when the 3 C's are involved: coercive, corrupt, and where there is covert activity.
There are members, as you know, of the Chinese diaspora community who say a registry is needed. There have also been members, descendants of those who had to pay a head tax, and activists who have fought for redress, who didn't appreciate your comments of conflating racist policies of the past with a registry, which many advocates say is needed. How do you respond to concerns from people who say we should not be talking about racist policies of the past in the context of a registry at a time when the country might not be doing all it can to stop election meddling?
I'd like to think that my critics agree with me that we should make sure that any foreign influence registry, indeed any new law that tries to counter foreign interference, is not discriminatory, it's not racist, it's not stigmatizing. So I join with them, I hope they join with me in participating fully in the consultation process to make sure that this new process that we are discussing, in fact, accomplishes those goals.
Okay, second row. And again, my apologies. Yes.
Oh, thanks. It's Rachel Haynes from CTV. So I just want to go to what you're saying about these 3 C's that are involved, which is when we have to investigate foreign interference. Based on what you've seen in the reports recently about possible foreign interference by China in the 2019 and 2021 elections, and then another story today from the Globe and Mail about municipal election interference, do you think that those reports amount to your criteria of these 3 C's?
I've not seen any evidence that has been verifiable or attributed to named legitimate sources, and I have no direct information about these allegations, so I really cannot comment.
Okay, thanks. So are you, before I go on to my next question, so are you saying that you don't think that there has been?
No, I'm saying I have no information. And based on the reports I've seen, these are all anonymous sources from leaked documents, so I cannot give it more weight than what they appear to be, leaked sources from anonymous individuals.
And as we're talking about the foreign registry, the Prime Minister said yesterday that we could take lessons from Australia's foreign registry, which requires people who are just advocating on behalf of foreign government to register, not necessarily targeting one specific population. Is that something that you have concerns with when we're talking about a broader look, not just Chinese communities?
We should absolutely take lessons from the experience of other countries that have put in place foreign influence registries and any possible stigmatization or silencing effect that it has on legitimate political discourse and the legitimate participation of racialized and other communities in the democratic processes of their country.
Okay. We have time to go to the phones or to the Zoom calls. First question, Mélanie Marquis from La Presse.
Merci. My question is again for Senator Wu. You're a popular man today. You have been dubbed, and those are not my words, but as Beijing's man in the Senate, as China's mouthpiece in the Senate, and a political commentator even retweeted your comment about the registry by commenting by saying, how much are they paying you? Do you have any ties with the Chinese regime? And what's your answer to all these, I guess we can describe them as attacks?
I'm not sure I want to dignify that question. It's deeply insulting. And it's actually an example of the dangers of a foreign influence registry that is based on the views that I express rather than on any demonstrable evidence of arrangements with the foreign government. The individuals who use this kind of extreme language should be very careful about what they say. Not so much for my sake, because I'm a privileged and somewhat protected individual. I don't like getting these attacks. But think about all the other Chinese people who don't have my privilege or my protections. Are they going to be accused of being fifth columnists because of the views they hold? Are we going to have a foreign influence registry that's going to use the views that one holds as the litmus test of being a foreign agent? I'm afraid the recent days, the recent examples you cited, give pause for worry.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up on the broader issue of interference, are you Governor General David Johnson was named as a special rapporteur yesterday. Are you of the opinion that a public inquiry on the issue of foreign interference would be the way to go? Thank you.
I'm very confident that our former Governor General, who's a distinguished Canadian, will do his job thoroughly, will do his job well, and I look forward to the results of his findings.
Next question, Xiaoyi Li from City News.
Thank you for taking my questions, and thank you, senators and everyone for coming today. This is for Senator Wu and perhaps Senator Oh. We could give Senator Wu a break. Are you concerned that introducing allegations of racism against Asians within the context of these foreign interference claims in Canada cheapens the experience of racism lived by early Chinese Canadians and Chinese Canadians today?
Not from my conversations with many Chinese Canadians. They feel that they are under a microscope. We know that there's been a sharp rise in anti-Asian racism, at least since 2018, 2019. So it's self-evident. And unless you think there's absolutely no possibility of racism creeping into the current debates, if you feel that way, then you can take that position. But if you believe that there is a possibility that there's stigmatization going on, that innuendo is causing damage to particular individuals and whole communities, then you have to take seriously the possibility that there's a racist or racialized element to the discussions that are going on. And let me just remind everyone that this is a press conference about the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Exclusion Act and how we went so far wrong 100 years ago. It was unanimous, by the way, you know. Nobody opposed it. Very few people opposed it. We went down this dark road so easily because of groupthink. I'm not saying we're going in to that same place again, but it is an important opportunity for us to reflect on how we went wrong and to make sure we don't go wrong again.
All right, and as a follow-up again for Senator Wu, do you regret putting this position on Twitter, a platform that notoriously lacks nuance?
Which comment are you referring to? Or the fact that I encourage consultations and encourage participation in the consultations? I don't regret that at all, because I've just said it again today, maybe 5 times already, and let me say it again. I encourage all Canadians to participate fully in the consultations for a foreign influence registry and to reflect on how to make that registry work for Canada, work to stop malign foreign interference without creating stigmatization.
Okay, next question, Limin Zhu from New Tang Dynasty Television.
Hi, the question is to Senator Wu. You talk about the harassment Chinese Canadian experience 100 years ago. I myself is a Chinese person, and I've talked to lots of Chinese people in this country that has been suppressed, discriminated, harassed by instigation from the Chinese Communist Party. Often the Chinese Canadians who serve as a surrogate of the Chinese government. That has been very prevalent. It's just happening so much. And I can refer you to Ontario Human Rights Commission decision that states that the Chinese Seniors Association, actually this association which is under the direction of the Chinese embassy, was expel seniors because they belong to the groups, the five poisons, the dissidents groups, you know, the Chinese government doesn't like. So the threat, is the threat to the Chinese community right now doesn't seem to be from the Canadian government or whatever. It's obviously like the threat of the many Chinese community members are from the Chinese government surrogate. The agents of the Chinese government was suppressing these people, so dividing the community. And so from that sense, these people very much are for the Foreign Influence Act. So I might be making a statement, but I do have a question. I have seen your report of 2017, which you made a conclusion, like there's you put on the website, there's regarding the interference in the Chinese community. The conclusion is that there's not much act is needed. My question is, how did you make that conclusion? Have you been able to talk to all these people that have been constantly discriminated, suppressed, and in all forms by this foreign influence? And I wonder whether, do you still hold that position or opinion? Now is that 5-6 years after your report? Thank you.
I agree with your statement that we should not divide the Chinese community, which means that we should oppose discrimination, harassment, bullying, coercive actions coming from all directions. I've said already that if we can identify foreign interference of the sort you describe, that's coercive, that's corrupt, that's covert, and we need new laws to manage these problems, we should put them in place. Again, the consultation is an excellent opportunity for us to think about what kinds of foreign interference are taking place, what kinds of harassment are taking place, and to reflect on what the best way to stop these things from happening. Perhaps it's the criminal code, I don't know. But I like to think that all of us are united in finding solutions to these kinds of problems coming from all sides, including from the Chinese government, finding solutions that do not end up stigmatizing other Canadians. We can have both. There's no reason why we need to have one or the other. I really hope someone would ask questions to some of my colleagues. We are talking about the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Can I have a follow-up question?
Yes, you can.
So-
A question, not a statement.
Okay, sure. I understand. Well, it's great to see this event you're organizing welcomes all Chinese and other ethnic groups. But obviously, like in the Chinese community, there are in the big cities, Vancouver and Toronto, even for the New Year's parade kind of thing, the organizers would have to, I don't know why, exclude the dissidents groups and their application to participate, like their 5 points and that's named, by the Chinese government, those are the dissidents group. But these groups, they can never participate their parade. Do you think you would like to take up the causes of these Chinese Canadians and to help heal that kind of division that sold by the Chinese Communist Party?
I don't know anything about the inner workings of the events you referred to and what decisions were taken and why they were made. What I will say, though, is that, being a Chinese Canadian does not depend on the blessing of the government of the People's Republic of China. Pride in Chinese heritage, pride in Chinese culture is not a function of what Beijing says to us or tells us. So there's no need for Chinese Canadians to involve Chinese officials necessarily in Chinese cultural events and festivals and celebrations. On your more general point about freedom of speech and freedom of expression, I support that 100%.
Okay, next question, Giacomo Burati from Omni News.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. This is for Senator Wu again. I'm sorry, it's going to be about the same topic once again. I wanted to ask you, you already talked about how foreign influence registry shouldn't be discriminatory or racist. I just wanted to ask you if you could be more specific, because many community groups have said that it's nothing like the Chinese Exclusion Act, and many have been advocating for a registry for years now. So how can he not be discriminatory given this premise? And can you please answer in English and Cantonese and Mandarin?
I'll just limit it to English for today, if you would please allow me, because I don't want my weak Putonghua to be misinterpreted, and my even weaker Guangdonghua to be mistranslated. I've said earlier already that a foreign influence registry that is based on where you come from, what your affiliations are, including your academic or your cultural or your sporting or your institutional relations with your former homeland, if these are some of the criteria for registration as a foreign agent, that would be very problematic. But most problematic of all is if the registry is even implicitly based on what your views are. And we've already heard today a number of times that people are claiming that I am some kind of a foreign agent. You heard the earlier question, not because they have any evidence of arrangements between myself and a foreign state, but because of my views. And if someone like me can be labeled in such a way because of the views I express, imagine the thousands and thousands and thousands of other Canadians who could also be stigmatized. And let me say one more thing. It isn't just about whether you are in fact on a registry. Some people will say, well, you know, you may worry about this, but you won't actually get on the registry. But a registry, just having a registry and having a discourse around who should be or who shouldn't be on a registry is going to be stigmatizing. Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a registry. I'm saying we should participate in the consultations so that we can make sure that the scenario I described does not come about.
Giacomo, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Yeah. My other follow-up was on something that you touched on. And I'm not going to ask you if you're a foreign agent, but some community leaders have said, even to a parliamentary committee, that, you know, saying that a registry or an investigation can stoke discrimination and racism is a line has been used by the Chinese government. So where do you draw the line? What is the difference here?
If you hate the Chinese government so much that you are unwilling to recognize the possibility of racism and stigmatization in our own country, that's your problem, not my problem. The fundamental question is what we do in our country and how we construct our laws. If we are genuinely concerned that a law could go very wrong, we should focus on how to make sure the law doesn't go wrong, even if another government or another party or another organization shares that view. Let's focus on what we can do. Let's focus on what we believe to be right, and let's try and get that right, and not be so concerned about who else is saying things or not saying things.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.